Today we're talking Occupy Charlotte, the governor's race, and the recent shooting at Flying Biscuit. I'm Carlton Hargrove, and this is 282. Thank you folks for joining us for 282. We've got a great conversation planned today, and if you want to get in on the conversation, go to Twitter and hit us up at 282TV. And, if you got any comments or any ideas about any of the topics that we're going to talk about today, just send it to us, 282TV at Twitter. All right, so let's jump right to the conversation. We've got a great group of folks here. I want to introduce everybody. We'll start on the end with Larry Shaheen. He is the host of The State of Mecklenburg and a partner in Carolina Political Consulting. And he's been here before, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me back.
Thank you. You look very nice, too.
Oh.
You also look very nice, Matt.
First shirt I found. So.
Well, that's a great one. We got Matt Tyndall, who's a local blogger.
Yep.
That Tyndall is how you pronounce your last name. All right. And we've also got a very auspicious guest right here, Warren Cooksey, who's a city councilman for District 7.
District 7, yes.
And also an avid comic book reader from what we discussed. Sorry, I don't want to out you like
okay.
that,
That's okay.
But it's great conversation.
It's good to have a hobby.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Appreciate that. We've got a very manly panel today. Usually we have a woman or three or two thrown in, but, today things happen, Now, let's jump right to the conversation, okay? And we've actually got an unfolding story going on right now in Occupy Charlotte. So let's just, a little bit of background. Like last week, the city of Charlotte proposed an ordinance and passed an ordinance that would basically throw all the Occupy Charlotte campers off that campsite.
It simply prohibits camping
okay.
on public property.
Well, I'll get to that. All right. Well, wait.
Has
I'll give
to
you a
leave
chance.
the site.
Well, let me just say this.
Yeah.
It told people that you could not do overnight camping.
You can't sleep.
You can't intend to sleep.
You can't intend to sleep there.
You can't put up tents to sleep. You can't lay
and
down
the
bedding
only
to sleep,
tent that you can have is sort of a canopy with it, like a table type thing, like a daytime operation.
The ordinance isn't that specific, but that is what is contemplated. That if you have a tent on the grounds, it is not for sleeping. Why else would you have a tent there? Well, it's to provide some shelter from rain or the sun, or that kind of thing.
So we've got this new ordinance that was voted in last week.
Right, took effect today.
Actually, it took effect today, and from a story I read in the Charlotte Observer, the CMPD has told everyone who sort of had this overnight camping situation that they have to leave by 2:30 p.m.
The tents have to be removed.
Tents have to be
People
removed.
don't have, I mean, that is the number one misunderstanding about this is that the ordinance does not prohibit anyone from demonstrating, picketing, exercising their First Amendment rights on city property.
They just can't stay there.
They just can't sleep there because sleeping
Okay.
is not, we've got a 1984 Supreme Court case that backs that up.
All right.
Camping, sleeping is not a First Amendment protected activity.
Napping, anything like that?
Napping would be
Napping
sleeping.
constitutes
Well,
sleeping.
somebody put up a sign today who is in line to get expelled right now that said they have an 8-hour meditation that they're about to do. So does meditation count?
If that's what that person wants to talk to a judge about, then that may be where it goes.
Well, they've got a 2:30.
Ultimately, these sorts of things always get worked out in courts.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that we have to understand and figure out about the system we work in. We can legislate, we as council members and state legislators and members of Congress can legislate all we want, but ultimately there's what the law says and then there's what the courts say it says.
Okay. Well,
that's what we constantly do.
Well, it's in motion right now. And, I'm sure that by the time this show airs tonight that it will be a different situation going on there. But, the thought process initially is this was done in lieu of the DNC, but it does have immediate effect on the Occupy movement.
Yeah.
So where do they have to go now? I mean, where does their movement go now, and does anybody really care?
Well,
let me back off on that part of the conversation.
Well, I mean,
that's a good
I
question.
can speak about the statute,
Here's a comment from a consulting standpoint.
Yeah.
I have clients come to me consistently who ask me how they can get involved in the political process. How can they be effective? Because there's two sides to all this entire story. There's the ability to be loud and to get press, and then there's the actual things that you have to do to be effective within the political system. A great article from The Economist came out when Occupy New York and Occupy Wall Street had just started, and their goal was, this is great, go out and do this. But when you're done protesting, You need to become a part of the valid political process to actually enact some change. And interestingly enough, and I'm going to call them out for this because this is what politics is intended to do, Occupy Charlotte had a fundraiser this last week at Dilworth Neighborhood Grill. And as always, you can't get money out of politics. And the catch of them, and the thing is they're not. It's not that they're not being allowed to protest. The ordinance itself allows protesting on sidewalks. They can stay on the grounds during the day.
I have to interrupt you for a particular point of constitutional purism. The ordinance, we're not authorized to allow anything.
Protesting occurs
It is a natural right that allows them to protest. We can at best regulate time, matter, and place.
Exactly.
Well, I've heard some people talking that it's not going to matter too much because the main Occupy protesters are gone during the day anyway, so they're not even sleeping there in the first place. That's the rumor.
Right?
That's the rumor.
So I'm sorry to have interrupted the rant, Larry.
You're fine. You're fine. And it is a bit
that's
of a
a
rant.
particular point to me about we have the inherent natural right to do all that we have the rights to do.
I'm certain.
Government regulates that. Yeah.
What bothers me the most about Occupy Charlotte, I agree with the fact that that we need to have an honest and open discussion about the effect of money on politics. Yes, that's a great discussion to have. I agree that we need to work towards making government work for all people, not just some. However, when you sit in a city council meeting of Charlotte and you have a deputy chief police officer at the podium talking about what other people have done for detestable things, and the members of the Occupy Charlotte group are laughing in the crowd at detestable things done to police officers in other cities, I'm gonna take a bipartisan stance here and agree with Democratic Councilmember David Howard. That is disturbing. That is the most disturbing part of this entire process, because you can either be a part of the system and be a part of the group and actually try to help us, because these ordinances are not meant for the people here in Charlotte currently.
But although, I would assume that's only speaking to a segment of the Occupy people. But the question with this ordinance and with them having the ability, not having the ability to stay there overnight.
No, they can stay there overnight.
They just can't
simply
sleep.
Oh, sorry.
They can't
stay there overnight. I'm
They can't
sorry.
lay
This
down
is-
bedding.
A lot of
They can't-
nuances to this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You can't
So-
sleep. You
Protesting
can't lay
shifts and
down
everything
bedding.
like
You
that.
can't lay
But
down
the
a sleeping
question
bag. You
is,
can't be in a tent
does this
sleeping.
really strike at the heart of what they're trying to do? Because Occupy is all about occupying a space to make a point. It's
They can
civil
s-
disobedience.
And what is that point?
Several points. And now you would have to ask them. I'm not a member of the Occupy movement, but
that's the dilemma in thinking about the Occupy movement and working with it within the context of the existing representative democracy that we have, is that this is a group that avoids having leaders, avoids having leaders, I've been told, because leaders can be attacked, avoids having a message because messages can be corrupted. Then you're an inchoate mass that we can't address anything. If you don't have a message,
I think they do. Well,
yeah.
honestly, I mean, obviously, their main message is about economic disparities and inequality. Now, all the other stuff that falls underneath that is, I think, just subject to whoever is there at that particular point. But they've got the point across, and they've got people talking about it. But how much does occupying that space, and Matt, I don't know if you can speak to this, but how much is actually sitting in that space, going to sleep at night, how much does it have to do with getting the point across at this point?
Well, I think we've talked about it before, that the point's not just to occupy it. The point is probably to be removed from there.
Right.
And have a scene cause where it looks like people are getting drug away. It's civil disobedience
Right.
at its best.
And I
So
think that's the point,
Charlotte's
right?
done a good job
Oh,
in not
gosh.
really pulling them away and putting the burden on
But
them.
really, I think when you look at how people have diffused Occupy movements, what they have done is not to forcibly go in there.
And that's the key, is that Charlotte, I have to give the Charlotte City Council and Councilmember Cooksey in particular a lot of credit for how they have dealt with the Occupy Charlotte groups. The Occupy Charlotte group itself, they are constitutionally allowed to do whatever it is they wish on city property during the day, as long as they're not sleeping.
Constitutionally guaranteed.
Constitutionally guaranteed.
Yeah.
But here's the catch: if you're not going to use those if you don't have a message and you don't have a goal of where you want to go, it's not that what they're saying is not important. It's the way they're saying it. You can't. Dr. King, and actually, it's interesting. We're talking about this today on the anniversary of the death of Mahatma Gandhi. Today's the day that Mohandas Gandhi was killed.
Well, but before we go into
Before we get that deep.
yeah, before we get that deep, we're going to switch gears. Okay, we're going to switch gears because the Occupy thing is something we could talk about again and again, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it probably next week after whatever happens today happens. So let's switch gears to the next subject, which I'm sure you guys have a lot to say about, which is the Bev Perdue.
Oh boy.
Now,
Who?
well, our current governor, has said that she's not going to seek re-election for, whatever reasons, and which leaves kind of everybody else up in sort of a tizzy. I mean, you've got Pat McCrory over here, you've got the Democrats over here. I mean, number one, how does this affect McCrory's chances? And then what does that do to the Democrats, period?
Well, I like what it does for McCrory's chances. I thought McCrory, I thought Pat had a great chance to win anyway.
Okay.
And now when you remove the incumbent, because let's talk about some of the most significant, and I'll jump on the consultants territory on this one, so that I'll provide the superficial
just
level.
For fun, I'm going to argue with you. Just for fun, I'm going to argue with you. Go ahead.
Okay, you just ramped up the chess game. Okay, I mean, three of the most significant factors in any election campaign are power of incumbency, name recognition, and fundraising. I dare you to find a way to poke a hole in that.
Okay, here we go.
But anyway, so when the incumbent removes herself from running, that opens the floor to folks who may or may not have name recognition and have to scramble to raise the money it takes to buy the name recognition necessary to get people to pay attention. I mean, public policy polling I heard on the way in has already run polls on 13 potential competitors, and Pat's beating them all. Now, he's beating Erskine Bowles by the smallest margin, but he's beating them all just as he was beating Bev Perdue.
Right.
It takes a lot of time and effort. And we're talking about a guy who basically has been running for governor almost since he lost the governor's race in 2008.
Right.
That's a lot of name recognition. That's a lot of opportunity to present yourself as the winner. And so, Larry, if it's not power of incumbency, name recognition, and fundraising,
I'm going to let Matt talk first.
What is?
I want to hear what Matt thinks.
Matt,
I want to hear what
he's
someone
gonna
who's not
argue with
involved
me.
in this. Yeah.
I mean, from what I've heard, Pat McCrory's raised a lot of money. I think it's going to be hard to fight with him on that. I don't think Fox has a real fighting chance because anything he takes credit for, McCrory can say that he gave it to him.
You don't think Fox has a chance? I mean, obviously he's got somebody with name recognition. He could probably get some cash.
I think he can get
Anthony
some cash.
Fox has no name recognition outside of Mecklenburg County.
Well, that's people say that about Pat McCrory too, and I mean that was one of his biggest problems when he ran before. So I mean, it's sloppy seconds this time around. I mean, are people really? Is it going to be sort of a Mitt Romney-ish kind of thing, or are people going to really warm up to him from the get-go?
Is the rest of the state want to pick between what they might see as the lesser of two evils of two charlatans running for the governorship? I mean, I think that's where McCrory lost in the last one, is that Perdue was able to penetrate the rest of the state.
No. McCrory lost because President Obama turned out so many people to drive to the polls. When you subtract, statewide, when you subtract the straight ticket voting, Pat McCrory was the choice of 54% of folks who actually made a choice in the governor's race.
When this is going to straight ticket voting, something that I think is going to be interesting is during the primaries, how is a maybe increased Democrat race going to work against the gay marriage amendment?
Or for it. Yeah.
Is it going to drive more Democrats out to maybe vote it down, or empower more Republicans to come out to?
He just shifted gears on
I know.
Are you going to let him get away with that?
It was interesting, but I mean,
Larry hasn't refuted my incumbency, name recognition, and fundraising aspect yet.
Let's not shift topics.
You are confusing. And Warren, I think you are absolutely right. If we were looking at North Carolina, if you were going to look at North Carolina in a bubble, and that just Pat and just Mayor McCrory and just possibly Lieutenant Governor Walter Dalton.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah,
Okay.
possible House Representative.
OFA, once again.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I mean, with Heath Schuler looking at this race, with Representative Faison looking at this race, with Anthony Fox, possibly Jennifer Roberts looking at this race. It's not going to be about who Mayor McCrory's opponent is going to be, because we all know that Mayor McCrory's real opponent is President Barack Obama. President Obama has put together one of the most powerful historic grassroots organizations in organizing for America that we've ever seen. They have, at the moment, 8 full-time staffers on the ground here in Charlotte doing nothing but registering Democratic voters. If Pat McCrory wants to win the governor's seat, he needs to focus his message on 3 things. He needs to focus on why the policies of the Barack Obama administration have failed North Carolina, why the Democratic Party of North Carolina has been in power for so long, and how they have failed North Carolina, and how he is going to actually make some changes. Those three things, if he can get that message across, will not only resonate with the conservative Eastern Democratic voters who will not know who to vote for, and they will also enable him to work with the moderate business-minded folks who have seen the policies of President Barack Obama fail North Carolina, and who have seen the former governor and Democratic leadership within North Carolina fail the business community on more than one occasion.
But can I jump in here? I mean,
I guess it's your show.
Thanks, guys. Now, I don't totally agree, and I'm sure many of our viewers don't totally agree with everything you're saying. But now, what if Newt becomes the candidate for the GOP? Now, will that have the same effect as, you know, kind of smearing McCrory and all the?
Well,
I mean, because he's not a
you're going to
loved figure.
Well, that's a big if. Well, remains to be seen. I think today's the Florida primary, so whoever comes out of the Florida or what the Florida primary numbers do will tell us a good bit about that.
Is it today?
I'm sorry, tomorrow.
No, it's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. If only it were today. I kind of wish it were over, but it's tomorrow. But you know, I have joked in another context that because North Carolina's primary is so late in the process, if the decision for the Republican nominee is made before North Carolina comes into play in the primary side, that means that none of the candidates really built up any kind of grassroots organization here. It may take Pat McCrory's coattails to get the Republican nominee to win North Carolina.
Wow.
So who's in the driver's seat really in there?
And yes, that's exactly right. And the catch that everyone's going to have to look at, the thing that's going is if the only way. Not the only way, but one of the most effective ways that Pat McCrory is going to be able to distance himself from because he was going to, and he was wisely going to attack Bev Perdue for her policies. Now he is the front runner. What is then you know this? Every consultant will tell the front runner, you do not acknowledge your opponent, especially when you know you've got him beat on name ID. So he'll have his debates, but he's not going to draw attention to whoever it is.
The difference is leadership.
Exactly. The difference is leadership.
And to the point about the Obama organizing grassroots machine, absolutely, it's still present. It's still here. I don't know that it will have the same. I'm not certain at this point that it'll have the same impact that it did in 2008, because you know it's a lot harder to preach a message of hope and change to inspire people to turn out to vote after the last 3 years we've had versus the 8 years that Obama came into from. And secondly, recall that that governor's race was very tight. Over 4 million votes cast, and McCrory loses by 145,000. When you're talking over 4 million cast, that's a small number.
Okay.
So I'm very bullish on Pat McCrory being the next governor.
Okay. All right. Well, we shall see. We shall see. We're going to switch gears to our one of our last topics today, which is a pretty contentious topic. It's about a woman who was shot.
No, she wasn't shot. She was murdered.
She was murdered. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
but
but
you know, I'm glad. Are you a lawyer?
No.
Okay.
No.
He should be.
Really good.
But no, it happened.
But semantics.
It happened in District 7.
Okay,
so
all right.
that's why
For
I'm
him,
very
this is
familiar with
big
this
deal.
case.
Well, a woman was
happened in
killed.
District
A
7.
woman
Yes.
was killed.
Yeah.
She was pregnant, so her unborn baby also died. The guy who apparently did it, the suspect, is being charged with murder of the unborn child and the mother. And the question then becomes, how much of this will affect just the anti-abortion or pro-life, pro-choice argument? Will this give pro-life, activists ammunition to actually limit abortion even more in North Carolina?
I have a story on this, so let me go to the rest of the panel if you want to
Matt,
jump in.
I was just going to
before
say,
I
isn't
do.
this the first case for
This
this
will be
new
the
law?
first
Is this
time
This is the first
Egan's
case.
law?
Yeah, the law was recently passed.
I mean, I think we can debate it all we want, but until it goes to the higher courts, because it will probably be challenged and challenged and challenged. We might know in a year or two from now what it means to that. But I can see where they can make the link at. They don't specify where life starts here, and they do over in the abortion camp. So
Was that really the intent when the law was created in the first place, to be able to kind of chip away at abortion rights?
One of the things about politics and policy is that everyone can play a card about what they think something is. But to me, the most guiding aspect of this is, as fortune would have it, I got to hear from Representative John Faircloth, a Republican in the North Carolina House, last Thursday at a statewide meeting I was at. He was on the committee that recommended this law to the state house for passage, and then it went on to pass. And he told the story of the day that the law was considered. The most powerful speaker in favor of that bill was an older woman whose daughter had been murdered by the daughter's boyfriend about 4 days before her due date. She was carrying their child. The boyfriend did not want to be a father, and so that's why he had committed the murder. And so what this older woman went through the committee room to every member of the committee, held up 2 photos from the double funeral. They had the granddaughter or grandchild was delivered. Ethan's law, it may have been a grandson. Representative Fairclough wasn't that particular on it. Child had been delivered post-death, and there were separate coffins. Both were dressed, for burial. And this one walked to every committee member and said, "Tell me that 2 murders did not occur here. My daughter got justice. My granddaughter did not."
But wasn't then, couldn't they still charge him with a double murder then because of intent? And I thought that's the way the law used to be, is that if you knew that she was pregnant and you killed them both, that you could still be charged with a double murder.
That's a layer that I'm not an attorney on.
Okay.
But I would suspect, given the nature of that story, that if that were the case, the older woman would not have been there lobbying for this law. I mean, I've got to draw that conclusion based from what I was told about it. And so Representative Fairclough's point was, yes, you can have this law get tangled up in the larger discussions and debates about pro-life, pro-choice. But at that moment, in that room, it was about justice for a woman's grandchild.
And that is the key essential element that we are forgetting. Everyone looks to the courts to have them act in one way or another. They look to them to see if they will legislate from the bench. Folks always say that's the justice you should get, but it's not always going to be what you want. And the problem has been that this is an issue that when you go to courts and when you have a judge making a decision on this, he's making a decision on the law. That is why the legislature and the executive branch exist. If we look to our founders and the way that they created this, they did not want judges to be legislating from the bench. Yes, it could get tied into the larger debate on whether or not abortion is legal or it's immoral. Roe v. Wade is settled law until such time the Supreme Court rules on that, or the states themselves act in such a way to restrict it. We're not going to have a challenge on that. The question that needs to be considered here, and the question that you and I have spoken on about several situations, is the question I think needs to be asked. It wasn't an issue. This gentleman had robbed a convenience store before, was in jail for it, was rehired, and had been and then did the same thing again. And this time, he actually murdered someone and an unborn child.
Right.
The question that should be being asked is not about the abortion issue. The question that should be asked is: are we focused enough on our judicial system and our prison system to make sure that we're not failing people, or that we're keeping the people who need to be in jail in jail?
Well, let me keep it on the abortion issue though. Because I think that you were saying before, until states start to do things to limit it, but states are. I mean, North Carolina is pushing through lots of different, legislation that would, force a doctor to do ultrasounds and all this other stuff, and just to have the counselor read to them what an abortion is like. And lots of states are doing this.
I mean, you're right,
So in lieu of that, that shows intent to want to even limit it further. I mean, this is a very, live round that we have floating around, don't you think?
It is a live round, but here's the catch. In no way, shape, or form has the state said you're not going to get an abortion if you follow these measures. It's like free speech. It's the same thing with free speech. You have a constitutionally protected right to free speech, but we can prescribe the time, measure, and place. And the states have to be able to prescribe the time, measure, and place so that the local individuals who have a stake in what's going on can determine the level of government that they wish to have around them.
Okay, we're going to wrap up. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I just want to say, government regulates the medical profession all the time. You can't advertise medication without providing the list of side effects and all that. If you wish to view abortion as simply a medical procedure, then you have to concede that the government, be it federal or state, has some authority to regulate it, to regulate how it's done, by whom it's done, where it's done, just like they do every other medical procedure.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. We're going to leave on that very hot button aspect of this issue. But before we wrap up, I do want to kind of go around and get you guys to say what you think was the most underreported story of the week. I'll start. I'll start. There actually was a story about a woman named C. Scott, who is one of the founders of the McCall Center for Visual Art, and she left recently for undisclosed reasons, and now it's sort of left a void in the whole artistic community. We did a story about that at QCityMetro.com, and I think it's a story that not a lot of people were paying attention to, and it could really kind of hamper the creative community even more. So check that out at QCityMetro.com.
Good point.
What do you think, Warren?
Well, if you're going to come to a politician for an underreported story, it's going to be so esoteric nobody else cares about it.
It's okay.
A day or so before Governor Perdue announced she was not running for re-election, 53 mayors across the state of North Carolina signed a letter endorsing her idea for an additional sales tax to support education and sent that letter to the legislature, creating a tremendous outrage amongst the leadership team in the General Assembly, who actually thought the North Carolina League of Municipalities had done it, but actually it was the governor's office who done it. Now those 53 mayors have been left hanging out to dry by a governor who's not running for re-election.
Okay, that is esoteric.
Yeah.
But it was good.
But it was not. It didn't get a lot of reporting.
No, that was good.
And Mayor Fox did not sign it,
Okay,
which I
Matt.
thought was interesting.
I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about the new Carolina Panthers logo that
Yes.
came out last
You
night
just
this
stole
morning.
my story.
They got new uniforms too.
Oh, no.
So Larry, I know you got something
Underreported
else.
story.
Underreported story. Let me see.
Although the Panthers logo thing was
Pan-
like on the front page.
The Panthers logo thing.
You're going to hear more about it. though.
Okay.
If we're going to do an underreported story, I think it's probably going to have to be something that has to do with the fact that that very quietly and the fact that Newt has in the last few weeks very quietly lost Florida.
Yeah.
And the paper's been reporting it. You can see that Romney has a double-digit lead in Florida. But no one's reporting how it's happening, because here's the thing: for the last 2 and 3 months, we've seen these shifts, and we've seen the power of 527 influence on these races. So I think that's going to be. I think that is a big issue that needs to be addressed.
Okay, that's big. We will see what happens tomorrow. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Larry, Matt, Warren, appreciate it. Come back next week for another episode of 282. I'm Carlton Hargrove. Thank you for joining us.